I've been playing Diablo 4 non-stop since the release of Season 4, and I have now finished the seasonal quest, got to World Tier 4, and ready to start the endgame grind. So I think this is a good time to take a pause and talk about my experience with the game after all the major changes that Blizzard has made. For some context before we get to the actual review, this is my second season with Diablo 4. I started playing the game back in Season 2 and did not play Season 3 because everyone said it was bad. Between then and now, I've put in around 500 hours into Path of Exile, so I'll be making quite a few comparisons between the two games. This time, I decided to play a Necromancer because I have never played the class before, and I heard Blizzard has made some big changes to Minions build, so it should be pretty good now. After logging into the game, the first thing I immediately noticed is how nice the graphics are compared to PoE. While PoE might be superior in gameplay and depth, D4 just feels really nice to look at and play. I also immediately started trying out the AWSD movement controls, and I'll have to admit, it felt really good compared to the old point and click movement scheme. I can't imagine I will have a hard time adjusting when I have to play without it again when I go back to PoE. However, it was quite a bummer that the evade in movement direction option was actually bugged and doesn't work at all. So I had to revert back to evading in the direction of the mouse cursor, which doesn't feel as good. Fortunately, I was able to find a workaround sometime later. As it turns out, all I have to do is to plug in a game controller which I happen to have, and the evade in movement direction works perfectly now. Just to clarify, you don't have to actually use the controller, just have to plug it in. At first I thought I would level up by doing the campaign again, as it has been a while since my first campaign playthrough. But after about an hour, I began to realize that it wasn't a good idea, mainly because I have experienced the endgame before, so the campaign feels really slow in comparison. And the story and execution is not that great either, so I wasn't really engaged. I was about to reroll a new character and choose to skip campaign this time, but fortunately for me, Blizzard brilliantly made it so that skipping the campaign is possible at the character selection screen, even after the character is created. Without the main campaign, I decided to follow the seasonal quest next. All I can say about the seasonal quest is that it is serviceable. It is basically just a vessel to guide players into grinding Hell Tides and progress the seasonal reward list. To be honest, I don't really mind the bare bones seasonal quest this time, as I know it is not the main focus of Season 4. So, let's switch gear and actually talk about the main focus of Season 4, the Loot Reborn. Again, there's not a lot to say about it besides I really like it. In case you're unfamiliar, in Season 4, all gears now drop with much lesser affixes, 2 on rare gears and 3 on legendary gears, and the pool of those affixes have shrunk very significantly as well. So what it means is that there will be less useless affixes and less variation on the affixes on the gears that drop, and as a result, players do not need to spend as much time sifting through the loot as before. For me personally, I definitely felt the improvements quite a bit. Whenever I have a full bag of equipment and have to go back to town to process them, I don't feel overwhelmed like I did in Season 2. It only took a very short amount of time for me to look at everything and quickly decide if they are an upgrade or not, because there are less affixes that I have to check and compare. To make things even better, the blacksmith and vendors are now much closer to the portal, which makes the whole process a lot more streamlined as well. Next, we will segue into another related topic, equipment tampering. Since equipment now drop with much lesser affixes, Blizzard added the tampering system to allow players to add 2 additional affixes to legendary gears only. I still find it a bit strange that Blizzard does not allow us to tamper rare gears, which basically makes them useless besides for selling and salvaging, because they can only have a maximum of 2 affixes. Nonetheless, the tampering system itself is quite good. How it works is that you will find these tampering manuals that drop randomly, and each tampering manual contains a few affixes that can be randomly added to your gear when you tamper it using that particular manual. This introduces some controlled RNG crafting to the game, where you can choose, to a certain extent, what are the additional affixes that you would like to add to your gear. Each piece of equipment can only be tampered for a fixed number of times, so there is a very good chance to break the item and not get the affixes that you want. I think this is a very good balance between player agency and RNG, which I really like. There are also many other quality of life changes that I might have missed in this video. Like for example, salvage legendary aspects now go immediately into the Codex of Power and not take up inventory space. All of these improvements really make the loot management experience feels really good and not tedious at all. And I feel I can spend a lot more time farming and improving my character and less time in town sorting through the loot. Some of the more hardcore or veteran players might say all these changes are making the game too easy, which I completely disagree. Sure, it will probably take way lesser time for players to grind and get good gears for their builds, but as long as there are challenging content to constantly push the boundaries, I don't think that it is a problem at all. For example, when I feel that World Tier 2 is getting too easy, I can just go and challenge the capstone dungeon early. In fact, I did mine at level 35 and got my ass kicked a few times, and get to the more challenging content in World Tier 3. I'm about 10 hours in now, and I do not feel that the game is too easy at all. So I think at least for the early game, the new systems are working much better than what we have before. Next, I want to change the topic a little bit and talk about the Hell Tides. The Hell Tide is probably the best leveling experience that I ever had in an RPG game. It is basically taking the best part about playing an ARPG game, which is killing a bunch of mobs, and turn it up to 100. The mob density in Hell Tides are really dense, so much so that most of the time I don't even have to get on my mount to get to the next pack of mobs. While the Hell Tides in World Tier 1, 2, 3 are good, it gets even better in World Tier 4. When combined with the bounty mechanic, sometimes there are so much mobs that spawn that they fill up the whole screen. Whenever that happens, it makes me feel like I'm fighting a war in hell with my minion army, and it was really awesome and satisfying, and always a good challenging fight. Not to mention that the bosses and chests in Hell Tides give pretty good rewards, so it always felt good at the end of a grinding session. At first I was worried that leveling with just Hell Tides alone would get repetitive fast, but I'm really glad that is not the case at all. Blizzard somehow managed to put in enough events and special mechanics in Hell Tides to keep it fresh most of the time. Finally, the last topic that I want to bring up in this video is about how it feels to play a minion build in Diablo 4. I have not played a minion build in D4 before, so I don't really have a basis for comparison. All I know is that I've heard from content creators saying that minion builds were really bad and not viable at all before Season 4. Leading up to Season 4, I then heard from those who have played in the PTR saying that minion builds are really good now, which actually made me worried that it is going to be too strong and trivialize all content in the game. Now that I have played the build, I'm happy to share that is not the case at all. While the build feels really good, it is definitely not overpowered. The minions don't do ridiculous amounts of damage, and each of them can only hit a single target, so the AoE clear is actually not that great. What the build really excels at is its survivability and quality of life, where you do not have to spam buttons and manage resources, and can just let your minions take the aggro and do all the damage. The build also has a major weakness. If the minions get killed and there are not enough corpses nearby to resummon them, it is basically game over. Nonetheless, Minion Necromancer felt really fun and refreshing to play, so I think Blizzard did a fantastic job at making the playstyle viable. As for the final verdict, with all the bad press that Diablo 4 was getting prior to Season 4, I think we forgot to give credit to what Blizzard has already done right with the game. For example, unlike Path of Exile where the gear you picked up from the ground will always look silly and hideous, D4 has some of the best looking equipment and a full-fledged transmog system that makes your character always look good and fit the class fantasy. There are also the options for customization at character creation, easy character respec at any time, and a one-button campaign skip that we are kinda taking for granted. And not to mention the fantastic environment, world, sound, and enemy design that all add up to deliver a really immersive experience for the players. All that is to say that I was having a good time playing Diablo 4 in Season 2, and I'm now having some of the best time in my gaming history playing the game in Season 4. All there's left to do now is to continue to play the game and see if the impression holds up in the endgame as well. As for the leveling and early game experience, I do think that the current iteration of Diablo 4 has surpassed PoE and Last Epoch in that department. That's all I wanted to say in this video. If you enjoyed it, a like and subscribe would mean the world to me. Also, I would love to hear about your opinion on Season 4. Did you enjoy it? Or there are still some things that Blizzard needs to fix? Let me know in the comment section below. Thank you so very much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.